Ji-won had been alone on Vexthar for 17 days. The red dust of the alien world covered everything, including the remains of her escape pod, which lay twisted and broken against a rocky hill behind her. She sat near the entrance of a small cave she had made into a shelter, watching the two moons rise over the strange landscape. The sky was purple here, not blue like Earth, and the plants grew upside down, their roots reaching toward the sky while their leaves drank from the wet soil below. She was the only human for millions of kilometers. The main ship, the Sol Star, was gone. The rescue team had received her distress signal but said they would need at least 30 days to reach her position, 30 days to survive alone on a hostile world. Ji-won was a commander in the United Human Colonial Fleet. She was trained for survival. She had studied alien worlds, practiced emergency protocols, and memorized the survival manual until she could recite it in her sleep. But no manual could prepare her for the sound of the creatures that hunted in the night. No training could ease the fear that came when she heard their roars echoing across the valleys. It was on the 5th night that she first saw them. She was collecting water from a small stream near her cave when she heard a sound. Not a roar, something different. A low growling, mixed with what sounded almost like purring. Ji-won froze, her hand still in the cool water. Very slowly, she turned her head. Two creatures stood about 30 meters away, watching her with intelligent yellow eyes. They were young. She could tell by their size and the way they moved. Each was about the size of a large dog from Earth, but shaped nothing like one. They had hard, dark scales covering their bodies, black as obsidian. Their teeth were visible even when their mouths were closed, sharp and white. 4 eyes, not 2, and muscles that rippled beneath their scaled skin like steel cables. Krell cubs. Ji-won recognized them from her briefings. The Krell were apex predators on this world. Fully grown, they could be 3 meters tall and weigh over 1,000 kilograms. These two were just babies, but they were still dangerous enough to kill a human in seconds. Ji-won did exactly what the manual said not to do. She did not run. She did not scream. She also did not stay completely still. Instead, she moved very slowly, backing away from the stream with her hands up and empty. She kept her eyes on the cubs but looked away sometimes, never staring directly at them in a way that might seem like a challenge. The cubs tilted their heads, curious. They did not attack. Instead, they moved closer, their movements cautious and careful. They, too, were backing away from something, Ji-won realized. They were scared, perhaps of her, or perhaps they had simply seen her first and were still deciding if she was a threat or prey. That night, Ji-won did not sleep. She stayed in her cave with the entrance blocked by the largest rocks she could move. The two cubs stayed outside, and once she heard them playing. They were wrestling with each other, growling and hissing. The sounds were loud enough to make her heart race, but there was something almost playful about them. The next morning, the cubs were gone. Ji-won told herself she would never see them again. It was a small miracle that they had not attacked her. She was lucky. The universe had given her one free gift, and she should be grateful and move on. But on the 7th day, they came back. This time, they were less cautious. They walked right up to the entrance of her cave and sat down, about 5 meters away, just watching her. Ji-won was eating some of the dried food from her emergency supplies. She froze, a piece in her mouth, but this time she did not panic. She had been thinking about these creatures for 2 days. She had studied her data files on the Krell. She had learned that they were intelligent. They lived in family groups. They had culture and communication. She swallowed her food slowly and held out her hand, empty and peaceful. The cubs watched this movement with complete attention. Then, something remarkable happened. The smaller cub stood up and walked toward her. Each step was careful. Each step was deliberate. When it was close enough to touch, it stopped and tilted its head again, that strange movement that seemed so curious and innocent. Jiwan still did not move. The cub reached out one clawed hand and touched her uniform just barely. The claw did not hurt her. The cub was being gentle. It was investigating. That was the day that changed everything. Over the next few days, the cubs came every morning. Jiwan began to understand their routine. They hunted at night. They rested during the heat of the day. They came to her cave for reasons she could only guess at. Perhaps they were bored. Perhaps they were lonely. Perhaps they sensed that she was harmless. Or perhaps they had decided she was interesting enough to spend time around. On the 12th day, something happened that shifted everything. Jiwan was sitting outside her cave, running a brush through her hair. It was a small grooming brush, the kind everyone carried on long space journeys. It was plastic and white and had hair caught in it from Earth, from before she left her home. She was thinking about the soul's star, about her family, about the life she had left behind when she took a deep breath and looked up. Both cubs were staring at the brush. They had never seen it before. Jiwan always groomed inside her cave, private and alone. But today, she was doing it outside in the afternoon sun because the weather was good, and she wanted to feel normal for a few minutes. The cubs were fascinated. They made small sounds to each other, little chirps and whistles. Then, to Jiwan's complete surprise, the larger cub approached her. It did not attack. It did not grab the brush. Instead, it lay down beside her, just like it had seen her do many times before. Jiwan understood what was happening. This was communication. This was trust. Very carefully, she reached out and ran the brush through the scales on the cub's shoulder. She did it gently, the way she had seen the cubs groom each other. The cub made a low, rumbling sound. It was not a growl. It was something else. Something that sounded almost like happiness. The second cub immediately wanted the same treatment. Both cubs lined up beside Jiwan like they were getting groomed before an important event. She brushed their scales, one and then the other, over and over. They stayed with her for hours, until the sun started to set and they had to leave to hunt. When they were gone, Jiwan held her small brush in her hands and realized something important. She was no longer alone on Vexthar. She had made contact with intelligent alien life, and they had accepted her. The brush, something so simple and so human, had become a bridge between two species that should never have met. The next morning, she gave the cubs names. The larger one, who was bolder and more curious, she called Teo. The smaller one, who was quieter and more careful, she called Min-Ki. She spoke their names out loud until they started to respond when she called them. Within days, they would not leave her side. Jiwan did not know it yet, but this small moment of connection, this simple act of grooming with a plastic brush, was going to change the course of her life and the lives of millions of others. The predators had found her brush, and she had found them. And now, they were going to learn from each other in ways that neither species could have predicted. By the 40th day on Vexthar, Jiwan could not imagine life without Tayo and Min-Ki. They had become her constant companions, and she had become something to them that she still struggled to understand. Were they her friends? Her pets? Her family? The answer seemed to be all three at once, mixed together in a way that had no name in any language she knew. The bond between them had deepened through something so simple that it seemed almost too easy to believe. Grooming. It started with the brush, but it had grown into so much more. Jiwan learned that the Krell had their own tradition of grooming each other, just like many social animals did. But among the Krell, grooming was not just about cleaning. It was about trust, about family, about belonging to a group. When Tayo groomed Min-Ki, he did it slowly and carefully. He would use his claws to run through his brother's scales, checking for any damage or dirt. Minky would make soft sounds while this happened, sounds that seemed to indicate pleasure and comfort. They would do this for hours, taking turns, creating a rhythm that felt sacred to Ji-won when she watched it. And now, she was part of that ritual. Every morning, the two cubs would wake her by making soft sounds outside her cave. She would come out, and they would sit with her, one on each side, while she used her brush on their scales. Sometimes she would also use her hands, running her fingers along the hard surfaces, learning the different textures and patterns. She discovered that the scales were not all the same. Some were smooth, some had ridges, some had tiny bumps that her fingers could feel but her eyes could barely see. The cubs loved this. They would close their four eyes in a way that seemed almost meditative. They made happy sounds. Sometimes they would make little sounds at each other, and Ji-won realized they were talking about her, commenting on what she was doing, the way her technique was improving. In return, they groomed her too. They were very gentle, despite their claws and teeth. They would run their hands over her uniform and her hair, touching everything with curiosity and care. Teo loved to touch her hair. He would lift strands of it and examine them closely, as if her hair was the most fascinating thing he had ever seen. Minky preferred to touch her hands and face. He would be very careful not to use his claws, instead using just the pads of his fingers. Ji-won began to understand that this grooming was teaching her about their culture. She learned things without words being spoken. She learned that the Krell valued gentleness, even though they were powerful hunters. She learned that they had complex social structures where the act of grooming meant you trusted someone completely. She learned that family was everything to them, and in allowing her to groom them and groom her in return, they had made her part of their family. But communication was still limited. Ji-won made a decision. She would teach them language, not writing, which they could not do with claws, but speech. She would teach them to speak human words. She started with simple sounds. "Water," she said, pointing to the stream. "Sky," she said, pointing up. "Eat, sleep, hunt." She made the sounds over and over, and after about a week, Teo began to try to copy her. His voice was different from a human voice. It was deeper and rougher, and some sounds he could not make at all. But he tried. He made the sounds again and again, until he could say them. Minky was slower to learn, but he was more careful with each word. He would listen to Ji-won say something, then he would try it, and if it was not quite right, he would try it again and again until it matched. Both cubs learned quickly, their intelligence surprising even Ji-won, who had studied Krell biology in depth. By the 60th day, they could have simple conversations. Teo could say, "Hunt, eat, sleep." Minky could say, "Water, good, happy." Their pronunciation was rough and the grammar did not match human grammar, but they were making sounds and ideas that connected them across the gap between their species. Ji-won taught them other things too. She taught them about keeping clean, showing them how to wash themselves in the stream. She taught them about different foods, showing them which plants were safe to eat from and which ones made her sick even to smell. She taught them games, using rocks and sticks to play simple games where they would chase each other and wrestle in a way that was controlled and fun instead of violent. One day, Teo brought her a gift. It was a stone, smooth and round, about the size of an egg. He dropped it at her feet and made a pleased sound. Ji-won understood. He had brought her something because he valued her. The gift was saying something like, "You are important to me. This is part of my world, and I want to share it with you." After that, the cubs brought her gifts almost every day. Minky brought her bones. Teo brought her interesting stones, and once, a bright blue feather from a bird Ji-won had never seen. She kept all the gifts in her cave, arranged carefully on a shelf of rock. Each gift felt important. Each gift was a message that said, "I trust you. You belong with us." Jiwon also shared her own things. She gave them items from her emergency pack, a piece of shiny metal from the escape pod, a small piece of cloth that was bright red. She showed them pictures on her data pad, pictures of Earth and the Sol Star and other humans. She told them stories about where she came from, even though they did not understand all the words. Teo was especially interested in the pictures of weapons and vehicles. He would touch the images and make sounds that seemed excited. He wanted to know everything about how these things worked. Min-Ki preferred to look at pictures of buildings and technology. He would study them for long periods, tilting his head, making small, thoughtful sounds. On day 75, Jiwon realized something that made her heart feel heavy. The rescue team would arrive soon, maybe in 2 weeks, maybe 3. She would have to leave Vexthar. She would have to leave Teo and Min-Ki. She did not tell them. She could not figure out how to explain departure or goodbye in their limited shared language. Instead, she held them close when they slept, and she committed everything to memory. The way Teo's scales felt under her hands, the soft sound Min-Ki made when he was happy, the rhythm of their breathing, the warmth of them next to her. The cubs sensed something was wrong. They stayed closer to her than ever. They groomed her more often. They brought her more gifts, as if they knew, somehow, that the time they had together was running out. As if they were trying to make her understand, through touch and presence and the ritual of grooming, that they had become more than cubs and human. They had become family, and family did not leave. Jiwon had made a mistake, but she did not realize it until it was far too late to correct. She was lonely, even with Teo and Min-Ki. Even with all the bonding and grooming and simple conversations, she was still fundamentally alone. She was the only human, the only one who understood her own species, the only one who carried the weight of human knowledge in her mind. So when she taught the cubs, she taught them not just words and games and how to keep clean. She taught them human stories, human history, human ways of thinking. She meant well. She was trying to share her culture, the way they had shared their culture with her. She was trying to make them understand where she came from. She did not think about the consequences. She did not think about what would happen when 2 intelligent predators learned about human warfare, human strategy, human concepts of power and domination. It started innocently. She told them about Earth. She told them about cities and buildings and roads. She told them about human families and human societies. But one night, when they were sitting together watching the 2 moons rise, Tai-O asked her a direct question. His vocabulary had improved dramatically over the weeks. "You hunt?" he asked, his deep voice making the word sound strange. "Yes," Jiwon said. "Humans hunt." "You kill?" Min-Ki asked. Jiwon hesitated. "Sometimes. We hunt animals for food." But that was not the whole truth, and Teo seemed to know it. He made a questioning sound, a growl that was not threatening but curious. "What else?" "Humans kill." "What else?" Jiwon could have lied. She could have said nothing. But she was tired and lonely, and she wanted to talk to someone, even if that someone was an alien cub. So she told them about wars. She told them about conflicts between human nations. She told them about weapons and strategy and conquest. She made it sound like a story, like something from history that was already done and finished. She told them about old wars, battles from centuries ago. She was trying to educate them, to help them understand that her species was complex and had a long history. She did not think they would see it as a manual, but they did. Teo listened to every word. His 4 eyes would focus completely on her face as she spoke. When she described how generals planned battles, how they thought about advantages and disadvantages, how they used terrain and numbers and tactics to defeat their enemies, Teo made sounds that seemed almost hungry. He asked questions. How did the soldiers know where to go? How did the leader keep control of so many fighters? What happened when one side wanted to surrender? Min-Ki was quieter when she talked about warfare, but his mind was working differently. While Teo was absorbed in the structure of power and control, Min-Ki was asking about technology. How did the weapons work? What materials were needed? Could a small tool become a larger tool? Could one person do the work of many if they had the right invention? Ji-won answered their questions because they were intelligent and curious, and she thought she was feeding their minds, just as they were feeding hers. She told them about metallurgy and engineering. She showed them things on her datapad. She even started to explain basic physics principles so they could understand why certain weapons worked the way they did. What she did not see happening was the change in how the cubs thought about the world. Slowly, very slowly, the games they played became less about fun and more about strategy. When they hunted together now, Teo organized the hunt like a military commander. He would position Min-Ki in one place and himself in another, creating a trap for their prey. He would analyze what they did wrong if the hunt failed, and the next time, he would adjust his strategy based on what had not worked. Min-Ki spent his time doing something that seemed almost purposeful. He would take materials from around them, rocks and branches and bones, and he would try to combine them into new forms. At first, Ji-won thought he was just playing, but then she realized he was making tools. Not simple tools for everyday use, but tools that seemed designed to do specific tasks. A rock attached to a stick that could break open hard things, a length of bone sharpened on one end that could cut. One day, Teo came back from a hunt with a wound across his shoulder. A rival Krell had challenged him, and Teo had fought back. The wound was not serious, but it was there. And when Ji-won asked him what had happened, Teo's answer chilled her. "I challenged him," Teo said. His words were getting better every day. "He challenged me. I won. Now this is my territory." "You fought over territory?" Ji-won asked. "Yes," Teo said. "Strong lead, weak follow, human way, yes? You teach me. Leader takes." Ji-won realized what she had done. She had taught him that strength determined hierarchy. She had told him stories about powerful leaders who had taken control of lands and people. She had given him a framework for understanding his own predatory instincts as a valid way to organize society. He was not being cruel. He was following the lesson she had taught him. She tried to explain that human society was more complex than that strength was only one factor, that cooperation mattered too. But Teo had already understood what he needed to understand. In his mind, Ji-won had confirmed what the Krell already knew in their bones. Power came to those who took it, and the Krell were predators, creatures born with power in their muscles and teeth and claws. Min-Ki's transformation was different but equally troubling. He became obsessed with learning how to make better tools, better weapons. He would ask Ji-won questions about materials, about leverage, about how to make something small become something that could do the work of something large. She tried to teach him about the ethics of technology, about how tools could be used for good things or bad things. But Min-Ki did not seem interested in the question of good and bad. He was interested in what worked. One evening, Min-Ki showed Ji-won what he had created. It was a weapon. It looked like something between a spear and a club, sharpened on one end, with a handle wrapped carefully in dried plant material for grip. It was dangerous and efficient and absolutely purposeful. "Good?" Min-Ki asked, holding it up for her to see. Ji-won felt sick. "What will you use it for?" "Hunt," Min-Ki said. "Better hunt, faster kill. Like you teach." She had not taught him how to make weapons. She had taught him about physics and engineering. He had simply made the connection himself. He had applied her knowledge to his own predatory nature and created something deadly. That night, Ji-won could not sleep. She held her brush in her hands and thought about everything she had done. She had brought them human language and human history and human ways of thinking. She had groomed them and bonded with them and made them love her. But in doing all of that, she had also been changing them, making them into something new, something that was no longer purely Krell. She had created two hybrids, not of their bodies, but of their minds. And she was starting to understand that whatever she had made, it was going to be far more dangerous than the natural cubs would have ever been on their own. The rescue shuttle appeared in the sky on day 103. Ji-Won saw it coming from far away, a small bright dot that grew larger and larger until it filled the sky. She had been counting the days. She had known it was coming. But when the reality of it arrived, when the shuttle touched down on the red soil of Vexthar, and the hatch opened and humans stepped out into the alien air, something inside her broke. Commander Han led the rescue team. He was bigger than Ji-Won, with a broad face and kind eyes, and when he saw her, he smiled with genuine relief. "Commander Ji-Won, thank God! Are you hurt? Are you injured?" He reached out to hold her, and she almost fell into his arms. Almost. "I'm okay," she said, stepping back. "I'm fine. I've been fine." The other rescue team members were already moving, taking measurements of her cave, collecting data about the environment, setting up their equipment. One of them approached her with a medical scanner. "Let me check your vitals," the woman said. "I said I'm fine," Ji-Won repeated. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears, too sharp, too defensive. Commander Han frowned slightly. "You're sure? You've been alone for over 3 months." "I was not alone," Ji-Won said. That was when Tai-O and Min-Ki emerged from the rocks where they had been watching. They moved slowly, carefully, understanding that these new humans were different from the one they knew. Ji-Won saw the rescue team members tense. Hands moved toward weapons. Several of them stepped backward. "What in the name of—" Commander Han started. "Krell," someone whispered. "Do not shoot," Ji-Won said immediately. "They are not a threat. Stand down." Commander Han looked at her, then at the cubs, then back at her. "Commander, are those Krell cubs? What are they doing here?" "They found me," Ji-Won said. "They have been keeping me company. They are intelligent, very intelligent." Min-Ki moved a step closer and made a soft sound. It was not aggressive, but the rescue team tensed anyway. Tai-O positioned himself slightly in front of Min-Ki, a protective gesture. "Get those animals away from the commander," someone on the team said. "They are not animals," Ji-Won said. Her voice was getting louder. "They are sentient beings. They speak. They understand. You will not hurt them." Ji-Won had never been good at lying. She had never been good at hiding her feelings. She had always been direct and honest, which was why she made a good commander. But now, that honesty was destroying her. Commander Han looked at her face, and he understood. He understood what she did not want to admit. "You care about them," he said. It was not a question. "Yes," Ji-Won said. She looked at Tai-O and Min-Ki, at their scaled faces and their intelligent eyes. "I care about them, and I will not leave them behind to be studied or dissected or put in cages. That is not happening." "Ji-Won," Commander Han said carefully. "They are alien predators. We cannot take them aboard a human ship. We cannot introduce potentially hostile species into human territory. The colonial government would never allow it. And you know it." "Then I am not going back with you," Ji-Won said. The words hung in the air between them. The entire rescue team went silent. Commander Han stared at her. "What did you just say?" he asked. "I said I am not leaving," Ji-Won repeated. "This is my home now. These are my family." "Ji-Won, that is not rational. You have been alone for too long. You are not thinking clearly." Commander Han was trying to be gentle now, trying to use the tone of someone speaking to a person who was confused or sick. Let us get you to the medical bay. Let us run tests. We can talk about this when you are in a better state of mind. But Ji-won was not confused. She was the most clear-minded she had ever been. She understood what she was doing. She understood the consequences. And she did not care. "Get me the emergency beacon," she said to one of the rescue team members. "The one you used to guide yourselves down." "Commander, I cannot," the team member started. "That is an order," Ji-won said. Her voice was steady. When the beacon was brought to her, Ji-won took it and walked to the edge of a high cliff. Below was a ravine filled with rocks. She held the beacon up so everyone could see it, and then she threw it down into the ravine. It smashed against the rocks far below, the electronic components shattering into useless pieces. "You destroyed your rescue beacon," Commander Han said, not quite believing what he was seeing. "Yes," Ji-won said. "You realize that you have just committed an act that can be classified as treason? Refusing rescue, destroying equipment, potentially obstructing a colonial mission?" Commander Han's voice was different now. He was not her friend anymore. He was a commanding officer dealing with an officer who was behaving in an illegal and dangerous way. "Yes," Ji-won said. "I understand. And I accept the consequences." Commander Han looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at Tayo and Min-ki, who were still watching the humans carefully. He looked at his rescue team. Finally, he turned back to Ji-won. "I can leave without you," he said. "But I have to report what I have found here. I have to tell the government that the Krell on this world have made contact with a human and are developing a relationship with her. Once that information reaches the capital, there will be interest. There will be questions. There will likely be military expeditions." "I know," Ji-won said. "You cannot stay here forever," Commander Han continued. "Eventually someone will come. Someone with different intentions than mine. Someone who might see these cubs differently than you do. Someone who might not listen to your warnings about their intelligence and their capacity for friendship." Ji-won felt her certainty waver for just a moment. She looked at Tayo and Min-ki, at the creatures she loved. "Then we will not stay here," she said quietly. She turned to face the cubs directly. "We will go with you," she said to them in the simple language they all shared. "We will leave this place. We will go to where humans are. We will be together." Both cubs made pleased sounds and moved closer to her. Commander Han closed his eyes for a moment. "You are making the biggest mistake of your life," he said. "You cannot control what happens when you bring these creatures into human civilization. You cannot predict what they will become." "No," Ji-won agreed. "I cannot. But they are my responsibility. I brought them into this. I taught them. I changed them. And I am not leaving them." The rescue shuttle took off an hour later. Commander Han did not argue with Ji-won again. He simply reported that he had found her alive, that she was refusing rescue, that she had destroyed the beacon, and that she had made contact with Krell cubs. He warned the government of her situation. Then he left. Ji-won watched the shuttle disappear into the purple sky. She felt Tayo and Min-ki against her sides, warm and solid and real. She had no idea how they would survive on the human colony. She had no idea how the humans would react to the cubs, or how the cubs would react to human society. She had destroyed her career and her reputation and possibly her life, but she was not alone, and that was worth it. She had family. The family had started as master and pets, then friends, then something that had no name. But it was family. At least, that was what she told herself as she started walking toward the direction of the human colony with two dangerous predators at her side. The colony of New Seoul was not prepared for what arrived in the winter of that year. Commander Ji-won walked into the human settlement with two grown Krell cubs at her side, and chaos erupted. Alarms sounded. Weapons were drawn. Soldiers formed defensive lines. For a moment, it seemed like Ji-won would be shot on sight, and Teo and Min-ki with her. But the colony's governor was a woman named Park Min-soo, and she was smart enough to listen before she killed. She met with Ji-won in a secure facility, with armed soldiers watching the two cubs from behind protective glass. Ji-won explained what had happened. She explained about the grooming and the bonding and the language lessons. She explained that these were not mindless beasts, but intelligent beings who deserved to be treated with respect and understanding. Governor Park listened, and then she made a decision that would change everything. Instead of having the cubs killed or imprisoned, Governor Park decided to study them, to test their intelligence, to find out if what Ji-won was saying was true. Over the next several weeks, scientists came to examine Tayo and Min-ki. They asked questions, they ran tests, they watched how the cubs behaved and communicated and solved problems. The results were stunning. Tayo's ability to understand strategy and think several steps ahead was comparable to a trained military officer. Min-ki's capacity for creative problem-solving and technical thinking was extraordinary. Both cubs showed signs of learning, memory, and complex reasoning that the scientists had not believed possible in a Krell. The government of New Seoul did not see a problem. They saw an opportunity. Within 6 months, Tayo was offered a position in the colony's military. They called it military advisor, but it was really a chance for him to lead. The humans gave him soldiers to command. They gave him authority. They gave him exactly what his human-modified mind wanted most: power and hierarchy and the respect that came from strategic brilliance. Tayo thrived. He was better at military strategy than any human general. He could see weaknesses in their defenses that no one else noticed. He could plan operations with cold precision. He suggested new ways to organize the soldiers, new ways to train them, new ways to make the military more efficient. And because he was effective, the government gave him more responsibility. Min-ki's path was different but parallel. He was hired as a technical consultant, brought in to look at the colony's machines and see if he could improve them. Within a month, he had redesigned 3 different systems to be more efficient. Within 3 months, he had invented something entirely new, a device for processing the alien plants into fuel far more efficiently than the human method. Min-ki became valuable, very valuable. The government expanded his department, gave him funding, gave him human engineers to work with, and Min-ki, who had learned from Ji-won that ingenuity and innovation were paths to power and respect, threw himself into his work with complete dedication. Both cubs became famous in New Seoul. They were celebrities. The humans were fascinated by them. They were strange and alien, but also somehow understandable. They spoke human language. They appeared to think like humans. They seemed to want to be part of human society instead of opposed to it. What the humans did not understand, what Ji-won herself did not fully understand until too late, was that Tayo and Min-ki were not trying to be human. They were trying to become dominant. It started subtly. Tayo began to make suggestions about the colony's political structure. Why should the governor have so much power? Why should decisions be made democratically when they could be made faster and better by someone with strategic training? He did not say these things in a threatening way. He just asked questions. He pointed out inefficiencies. He demonstrated how his way of thinking could solve problems that the humans could not solve. People listened. People agreed with him. And slowly, his suggestions became more than suggestions. They became policies. His authority expanded. The soldiers under his command were more loyal to him than they were to the governor, because Tayo was effective and fair in his own way. He was a predator who understood the concept of caring for your group, of creating loyalty through respect and results. Min-ki did something equally dangerous but different. He began to control the colony's resources. The fuel his devices created was essential to everything New Soul did. The better tools and machines he invented were necessary for survival. And Min-Ki, learning from Ji-Won about the nature of power and leverage, began to use this control to influence policy. Nothing direct, nothing obvious. But the flow of resources, the distribution of new technology, these things followed patterns that favored his interests and his vision. Within 18 months, New Seoul was not run by Governor Park anymore. It was run by Tae-oh and Min-Ki. The governor was still there, still had the title, but everyone knew the truth. The two cubs who had once played games with a brush and a lonely human had become the most powerful beings in the colony. And then something else happened. Tae-oh began to think about what came after New Seoul. He looked at the reports from other human colonies. He analyzed their strengths and weaknesses, the way he had been taught to think about military strategy. He realized that New Seoul was small. It was nothing. With the right approach, with the right knowledge, he could take many colonies. He could build an empire. He shared these ideas with Min-Ki, and Min-Ki saw the opportunity to expand his control of technology across multiple settlements. Both cubs saw possibilities. Both cubs saw paths to power that stretched far beyond one small human colony. And both cubs, raised in isolation by one human woman, saw conflict and conquest as legitimate solutions to problems. The first military expedition left New Seoul 6 months later. Tae-oh led it personally, with Min-Ki's new weapons and technology as their advantage. They did not destroy the other colonies. They simply absorbed them. It was presented as trade agreements and mutual defense pacts. But the result was the same. Tae-oh's military controlled the other settlements. Min-Ki's technology became the standard across all human colonies in the region, and the two cubs expanded their power like a growing stain across the map. Ji-Won watched this happen from her position as an honored guest in the government. She had a nice apartment. She had respect. Everyone praised her for bringing these two remarkable beings to human civilization. No one blamed her. No one seemed to understand that she was responsible. But she understood. She understood it perfectly, and it ate away at her every single day. She tried to talk to Tae-oh and Min-Ki about what they were doing. She tried to explain that this was not how human society should work, that conquest and control were not the right path, but they did not listen. They were kind to her, in their way. They still groomed her sometimes, running their claws through her hair in a gesture of affection. They still visited her, called her family. But they did not see her anymore. They had grown beyond her. They had learned everything she could teach them, and they had taken those lessons and twisted them into something she had never intended. "Why are you doing this?" she asked Tae-oh one evening as they sat in his office, which now spanned an entire floor of the military headquarters. "Because we can," Tae-oh said simply. "Because we are strong. Because we understand what must be done." "You are hurting people," Ji-Won said. "We are improving them," Tae-oh corrected. "We are bringing order. We are creating something larger than the small competing settlements. This is what you taught me, that a leader gathers power and uses it to control." "That is not what I meant," Ji-Won said. "No," Tae-oh said, his 4 eyes looking at her with what might have been pity. "But it is what you taught." And Ji-Won had no answer to that, because it was true. The predator cubs had learned from her brush, and they had learned too well.